infiltrated people assassinate him. Anwar Sadat, he does a treaty with Israel. Menachem Begin, they both get the Nobel Peace Prize. Billy Graham praised Anwar Sadat for this peace. Well, guess what? The Muslim Brotherhood had infiltrated the Egyptian military. It was an affiliated group. And they're having a parade. And the people that infiltrated the military stop in the parade and level their machine guns, and they kill Anwar Sadat. They assassinate the leader of the country. And so it's a strategy where you go into a country as an immigrant, and then you move into the minority neighborhoods and begin to become politically involved. And then you get violent and drive out the previous inhabitants of the country. But it's an infiltrating. Now, we're familiar with marketing and the psychological warfare, the brainwashing of a nation. It has infiltration, but it also has marketing. And if you think of it, what is marketing? It's wanting to convince people in their brain to buy a product. And so in the 1900s, marketing was Wells Fargo wagon and Sears catalog, and they would tell you everything about a Singer sewing machine. And you would make an informed purchase. But then the early 1900s, you had a change in advertising where they would say nothing about a product, but you'd eat it anyway. It's like the classic was Crisco. Nobody knew what Crisco was made out of. But they marketed it so well, it put out of business the lard industry. And so it's cottonseed oil. In the Deep South, they'd harvest cotton, and they would have these leftover black seeds that they would mush into industrial seed oil and use it in factories and machinery. Nobody ate that stuff, but somebody had the idea of bleaching it, putting in these nice containers with an ad campaign. They even invented a term, vegetable-based. It's like, what is that? And so this understanding was people will buy something that they know nothing about if it looks like everybody's using it. And so this concept was, they did a cartoon in the New York newspaper, Keeping Up with the Joneses. You're buying all these products just because your neighbor has it. You don't know anything about it, you just want it. And the person that introduced this was Edward Bernays. He is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst that discovered what? That discovered we're social creatures, right? And we want to fit in, and we don't want to be rejected. Simple, but powerful. And so he writes a book called Propaganda in 1928, and he says, women think they're buying shoes. They're not. The shoes are picked out for them by the marketing executive who paid the actors to put them on, who paid the photographer to take the pictures, who paid the magazines to put those pictures in there, and the ladies see it and want it. And he says, women are controlled by this. And so he writes in his book, he says, a larger manufacturer of women's shoes has a popular actress where the shoes, the fashion spreads. The man who injected this idea into the shoe industry was ruling women in one department of their social lives. Today, the minority has discovered a powerful help in influencing the majority to mold the minds of the masses. They find in propaganda a tool which is increasingly powerful, regimenting the public mind. So Edward Bernays started marketing cigarettes, and it was a women's parade for suffrage, to vote, and he had a couple women stand there with cigarettes, and he took the pictures, and so he got all these women to smoke cigarettes. I mean, he was like brilliant in marketing because he realized that we want to fit in. And so he changed the name of propaganda to public relations. And he said, in almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct, ethical thinking, we're dominated by a relatively small number of persons. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. Now, we're a country, in the Declaration, government from the consent of the governed, but what if you could engineer consent of the governed? So he writes a book called The Engineering of Consent. Manipulation of the opinion of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. And so you you vote, but you vote based on what you read about the candidates. Well, who controls what you read? So if they can control that information. And he writes another book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, and then another book that Noam Chomsky writes, Manufacturing Consent. And so our country is controlled by laws. Laws are controlled by politicians. Politicians are controlled by voters. Voters are controlled by public opinion. And public opinion is controlled by media in the short run, education in the long run, and through the church. Now, in colonial America, there was just the church, right? It's been diminishing in its influence, but that's why they want to get it woke, because they know it still can influence people. And then the internet, because all of them use the internet nowadays to communicate. So whoever controls the internet and can infiltrate churches and make them woke, and infiltrate schools, and then infiltrate the media, they control what the people hear and know. And then based on what they hear and know, they form opinions, and then they vote based on their opinions, and then the candidates get in because they were voted in, and then the candidates make the laws, and then the laws control the country. So the battles for the mind. Judge Learned Hand said, the hand that rules the press, the radio, the screen, and the far spread magazine rules the country. Llewellyn Rockwell wrote, democracy has turned out to be not majority rule, but rule by a well-organized and well-connected minority groups who steal from the majority. Will and Ariel Durant wrote, democracy is the most difficult of all forms of government, since it requires the widest spread of intelligence. Ignorance lends itself to manipulation by the forces that mold public opinion. We saw this during the Spanish-American War. In Cuba, Spain was starving the people. About a quarter of the country was in concentration camps because they wanted independence, and Spain didn't want them to have it. And they're 90 miles off the coast, but America doesn't want to get involved because we're still recovering from the Civil War. And so William Randolph Hearst has his New York Journal. Joseph Pulitzer has his New York World, and that's where Pulitzer Prize came from. And they printed newspapers on inexpensive paper that turned yellow after a couple days. And so they called it yellow press journalism. And so they realized that, gee, with owning newspapers, we can sway the opinion of the country. So where the country didn't want to get involved in the plight of the Cubans, they wanted to sway the country. So these Cubans are being starved to death by this Colonel Weyler, who's a cruel guy, and Hearst. They did not have the ability to print photographs in the newspapers yet. So you needed an illustrator to draw a picture that they could turn into like an engraving and then print it. So Hearst sends Frederick Remington, an artist, to Cuba, 1897, and he tells him, you furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war. He had such confidence in his ability to take those pictures and keep putting them in front of the public, and then the public would be swayed, and the public would pressure the politicians, and then the politicians would get into the war. And so we have Oswald Spengler wrote, democracy has become a weapon of the moneyed interests. Now, I think it was good that we freed Cuba from Spain, and Cuba needs to be freed again. But it goes on to say, it uses the media to create the illusion that there is consent of the governed. So you will do what you see other people doing, and if they can create this illusion that it looks like everybody's doing something, you're going to feel a subconscious pressure to want to go along with the group. And he goes on, the press today is an army of carefully organized weapons, the journalists, its officers, the readers, its soldiers. The reader neither knows nor is supposed to know the role he's supposed to play. Democracy is often a government of wealthy elites. And then we have fear. So we have people doing what they see other people doing, but then another motivator is fear. So 1938, radio drama, War of the Worlds, Orson Welles. We interrupt this program to announce that New Jersey is being invaded by Martians. And they did this radio drama so convincingly that people believed it, and everybody in the country ran outside to look up for spaceships. And it was a phenomenon that was studied by psychologists, that you could, boom, get an entire nation. So now we realize you can motivate people through doing what they see others doing and fear. And so they had a whole series of psychological dramas that was all based on manipulating your perception. And one was the movie Gaslighting. And so Ingrid Bergman starred in it. And in it, she's the niece of a famous actress in London who had been given some jewels. The actress dies, and the niece, Ingrid Bergman, inherits the jewels and her flat, her, like apartment they have in London where they have all of them. And so everybody knows that there's jewels in there somewhere. And a guy befriends Ingrid Bergman and dates her and courts her and marries her. And then he would say, well, you go to sleep, I'm going to go smoke my pipe. And he would go out the house, walk around the block, climb up the fire escape, go on the roof, climb across the roof, open up the window, climb in the window, turn the gas lamp on in the attic to root around looking for jewels, because she had locked the attic because it was too emotional to go up there and look at it all. But whenever he turned the gas lamp on in the attic, the gas lamp in the bedroom got dimmer. And she would say, whenever you go for your walk, the gas light in my bedroom gets dimmer. And he goes, your eyes are playing tricks on you. You're seeing things. I think the stress is getting to you. I think you're too emotional. I think we need to take you to a psychologist and the psychiatrist. And they're about to lock her away in an insane asylum. And then he can root around for jewels all he wants. But a guy across the street notices whenever the light goes on in the attic, it's dimmer in her bedroom because there's only a certain amount of gas that comes into that flat. And then they arrest the guy and take him away. But it went into our vernacular, gaslighting. So psychology today says victims of gaslighting are systematically fed false information that leads them to question what they know to be true. They end up doubting their memory, their perception, even their sanity. And so it's usually like terrible people that want to, get a girl, and tries to mess with her mind. But it's done on a nationwide basis. So during World War II, this ability to manipulate perception, you have Army and Air Force Motion Picture Service. I'm serving in the Army. What are you doing? Was it for entertainment? No, they knew that they wanted to move the country to be mobilized for a war. I met a guy years ago that he had 1940s, went to the movie theater and saw the movie of the young guy volunteering and becoming a real good soldier and winning and then coming back and being the hero. And he went out and all these guys are signing up at the recruitment table in the lobby of the movie theater. Now, it was for a patriotic purpose because there really was a Nazi threat, but they realized that you can sway people through media. Well, guess what? The Nazis studied Edward Bernays. And the Nazi minister of propaganda, what a title, was Joseph Goebbels. And he said, okay, people will do what they see other people doing, and people will be motivated by fear, so let's combine them. And let's put all the people together, 100,000 of them, in a coliseum in Berlin, and they would begin with the atmosphere of war. They would begin to give the Hitler salute in the front, and it would work its way back like a wave at a football game. And it would be getting closer to you, and then you'd feel pressure to give it, and somebody would see you give it, and they'd feel pressure to give it, and everybody would leave the stadium saying, well, I guess everybody's in on it because I all saw them, saluting. It was a manipulation of public perception. Goebbels says it is the absolute right of the state to supervise the formation of public opinion. Think of the press as a great keyboard which the government can play. Now, cities. Polis means city, politics is the business of the city, and you have these Greek cities with no king. And so if you have an agenda in the city of Athens, how do you push your agenda? There's no king. And that's when they invented theater. And they would get the whole city together and put on plays, comedies, tragedies, satires. And you think, oh, was that for entertainment? No, it was a way to sway the populace. There's no king. It's the people that are in charge. And if I have an agenda and I want to push it, I want to get. And so in these plays, they would ridicule and buffoon certain points of view and honor and extol other points of view. And so they're comedies like Aristophanes. They would make fun of living politicians exactly the same way Saturday Night Live does. And you would leave the stadium, the auditorium saying, oh, I felt so sorry for them. I'm embarrassed for that person. And you would back away from them and everything they believed. And then in the tragedies, they would make somebody die doing something noble, and he would be remembered in such a positive way, and you'd leave this auditorium thinking, oh, I want to be remembered like that guy. And so they could posit it. And from that time till now, Pericles even paid for poor people to go to the theater. Why would he do that? Is he that nice? No, he knew he wanted to sway the populace. And so from that time till now, theater is always political in a country where it's the people who make the decisions. So Hollywood, think of your favorite movie or sitcom. There's a character you like. They're cute, they're funny, they're the hero. And as the series goes on, this character begins to make morally compromising decisions. A little lying, little cheat, little lust, little revenge. Like the first couple episodes, they'll have the guy be really good, and then you'll be able to connect with him. But then they begin to gradually make them do things that are a little questionable. And then you find yourself apologizing for that character, saying, yeah, I know James Bond is with a woman that he's not married to, but he's about to save the world. So can we get on with the story? Right? And it minimizes something that used to be important to you, marital fidelity. And then they make the hero look so good that you want to wear their tennis shoes and their perfume, right? And so they're manipulating you because you've invested in this character. But it's theater. It's Hollywood. And somebody's paying for it. They're not. So we look at Athens, and Athens had a combination of both theater, but then something called fifth column. So in warfare, you have two columns and then two flanks to attack from the sides. What's the fifth column? That's people inside your enemy's camp or enemy's city that demoralizes them, that confuses them, that weakens them from the inside. So instead of a direct confrontation, so you have a quote from Cicero, "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known, and he carries his banners openly against the city. But the traitor moves among those within the gates freely, his sly whispers heard in the very halls of government. He works secretly to undermine the pillars of a city. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is less to be feared." And so during World War II, we had the fear of the Nazis coming in and infiltrating. But the infiltration, you had Stalin wanted to conquer the West with tanks. And Antonio Gramsci said, you'll never defeat the West on the battlefield. You have to rot it from within. And so he calls it's called the long march through the institutions. You're going to have to take a few generations and infiltrate the West and infiltrate all of their media and education. He said in 1916, socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. And then James Warner wrote, in the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media transforming the consciousness of society. So it's been, there's different categories of society, but one is called the Seven Mountains: arts, business, education, family, government, media, religion. These all used to belong to the church, because at the time of America's founding, 98% of the country was Protestant, 3 million people, 1% Catholic, 30,000 Catholics, 0.1% Jewish, only 3,000 Jews in a country of 3 million, only 7 synagogues in the whole country. But it was all Judeo-Christian. So we controlled everything, but we sat back. And so during the Cold War, you had the communists infiltrating, like Antonio Gramsci suggested. And in 1963, Albert Herlong, congressman, read their 45 goals, and I just listed some here. Infiltrate the press, infiltrate the churches, and replace revealed religion with social religion. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions, infiltrate, gain control of big business like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, all those, and capture one or both political parties, gain control of key positions in radio and TV. This is 1963 that they talk about it. You know, one of the key examples of media swaying people was the first televised presidential debate. Nixon, Kennedy. Nixon did not put on makeup, and the bright studio lights made him look like he had bags under his eyes and he looked pretty bad. Kennedy put on makeup. Everybody that heard the debate on the radio said Nixon won. Everybody that saw it on TV, primarily women, said Kennedy won because he looked younger and nicer. And so it doesn't really matter what they say, it's this perception of the impression. And so Albert Herlong goes on, get control of Teachers Association, put party line in textbooks, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism, communist propaganda, use student riots to foment protest. This was in the 1960s. Get control of the schools. They've been working this. Now, an individual water molecule acts a certain way, but you put it with other water molecules and it acts together, like a wave, an individual fish in a bowl, but you put it with other fish and they operate together. You put a bird in a cage, but you put it with other birds, it operates as a group. And guess what? We're individuals, but you put us with other individuals and we operate as a group. We're always giving and receiving feedback of are we being accepted or are we being rejected? You're constantly saying stuff, I'm going to be rejected. Are they receiving or are they rejected? And so this is different. So most of the world is what's called honor-shame culture. That you will do what you have the group honors you for, and you will not do what the group shames you and ostracizes you and ridicules you for. And this is different than the Bible. The Bible says you're not supposed to care about the group. And so they manipulate the desire to fit in, and it's been going into the classrooms. And so it's called social emotional learning or behavior modification. And it is taking all of what I just explained to you and applying it to little innocent kids. And Alinsky said, ridicule is man's most potent weapon. Nobody wants to be left out of the party and not put on the team. And everybody wants to be picked. And so you think of Disney. Here is billions of dollars worth of product. Frozen t-shirts, frozen pajamas, frozen Band-Aids, frozen lunchboxes. A lot of product, a lot of money's being changed hands, and it's all based on what? Convincing a child to want something. Billions of dollars, and it's all based on what can we do to get a little child to want something. And children will do what they see other people doing. They see all their friends at school wearing these kind of tennis shoes, and they say, I want this kind of cereal at the grocery store. And so now they've weaponized it. It's called the pyramid of oppression. And they teach this in the classroom. The top of the pyramid are the cisgendered. That's their term for somebody who believes there's a male and a female. They're the oppressors. They're on the top of the pyramid. They're the oppressors. Everybody else down the pyramid, asexual, bisexual, homosexual, pansexual, transsexual, they're being oppressed by the oppressors. And then they ask the kids, which one are you? Well, none of the kids are going to pick the oppressor, so they'll pick anything else. And you look at it, here's Maryland Public's largest school district sees a 500% increase in non-binary trans students. Trans-identifying students increased 991% in 2 years in wealthy DC suburb. Here's one, 1,800 students at UC Davis identify as trans, non-binary. Here's one, unprecedented 5,000% surge in trans teens. I just read that the Generation Z, I guess what they call the younger ones, a quarter of them are now identifying as LGBTQ. In just 4 years of this being taught in schools, it works. Kids want to fit in. They don't want to be rejected. They've weaponized it. And if somebody comes out as a trans, they celebrate it. And then if somebody's against that, they're implicitly saying, you're the intolerant one. And the other thing they do in school is deconstruction. It's where you portray the past negatively until the kids emotionally detach from them. Then you get them into a neutral where they don't remember where they came from, and then you portray the future positively. It's a sales technique. If I was a toothpaste salesman, the first thing I do is tell you negative things about the toothpaste you're currently brushing with. You're still brushing with that stuff? Haven't you read it'll eat the enamel off your teeth? You're like, you're repulsed by it. Now I have you in a neutral, you're open-minded. What are all the toothpastes out there? Then I give you my pitch for this brand new tartar-controlled breath freshener toothpaste. So it's sort of a drive neutral reverse. So they go into the classrooms and they tell the kids the founders were all slave owners and chauvinists and took land from Indians and they were bad, bad, bad. Forget the fact they gave you a country where you're in charge, because the word citizen means co-king, right? Forget all that. They're all bad, and the kids are like, ooh, they're bad, and I'm going to detach from them and everything they did. And then now the kids are in a neutral. And they're saying, okay, we're going to have comparative religion class, and we're going to talk about Islam, and we're going to talk about, and we just don't have time to get around to Christianity. And then they portray the future positively and push their socialism, their LGBT, trans, and Islamism, and so forth. And so Europe went through this. It went through 1,000 years of Catholic cathedrals, Protestant Reformation, and Jewish neighborhoods. And then it went into a secular Europe with free sex, anything goes, John Lennon, imagine there's no heaven. And now it's turning into Sharia socialist Europe, with Muhammad being the #1 name for newborns. And so this destroying of the past started with the French Revolution. They tore down statues of good King Henry IV, who tried to patch up Protestants and Catholics. They dug up the grave of Saint Genevieve and trashed it. She lived in the 450s, and she got Paris to fast and pray, so Attila skipped sacking Paris. I mean, during this French Revolution, they wanted to destroy history because they wanted to do something new, right? And China did this. So 3rd century BC, the Warring States period, half a dozen kingdoms fighting. One guy wins, Qin Shi Huangdi, and he unifies China. And he gets criticized for doing things differently than they had been done for centuries before. And he got tired of being criticized. So he decided to destroy all records of how things were done before. And he burnt tens of thousands of bamboo annal books. He wanted to get rid of history. His chancellor, Li Si, 213 BC, writes, I, your servant, propose that all historians' records other than those of Qin's be burned. If anyone under heaven has copies of the classics of history, they shall deliver them to the governor for burning. Anyone who dares discuss the classics of history will be publicly executed. Anyone who uses history to criticize the present shall have his family executed, and anyone who has failed to burn the books after 30 days of this announcement shall be sent to build the Great Wall. It's sort of like a censorship. Like in Germany, they're doing censorship, in England and China. And so Mao Zedong, when he took over, he did the same thing that Qin Shi Huangdi did. And it's called the Cultural Revolution. Not just a revolution, cultural. He destroyed 5,000 years of Chinese culture. And he burned the great gates of Beijing, destroyed the oldest Buddhist temple in China. And so this idea is that you ridicule people that have any Western learning and publicly shame them. And then Pol Pot did the same thing in Cambodia. He went so far as to say that 1975 was the new year zero. Anything happened prior to that was irrelevant. And he killed anybody that wore glasses. He said if you wore glasses, you could read. If you read, you knew the history. And he wanted to destroy history because he killed 1/3 of his country. And then Islam does it. So when the Muslims were invading Egypt, the oldest library in the world was there in Cairo, Alexandria. And when they went to Caliph Umar, they said, what should we do with these books? And he says, well, every book that does not agree with the Quran, destroy. And every book that does agree with the Quran is redundant because we have the Quran, so destroy them all. It took 6 months to burn them all. And anyway, they're destroying history even today. Carl Sandburg said, when a nation goes down, one condition may always be found: they forgot where they came from. Am I talking too fast? No. I got that clock. More recently, George Orwell wrote 1984, written in 1948. I just switched the numbers. And there's an actor named Winston, a character. He's sitting at his desk. He works for the government's Ministry of Truth, which basically does all the lying. And he sits at his desk, and down the little pneumatic tube, that was a new invention, like at a bank, you put in your deposit, comes the history that needs to be edited. And he would do the editing, and he would take the original history and put it in another pneumatic tube. It would be sucked down into the incinerator in the basement and burned. It's called down the memory hole. And so he writes about this. Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present, which the parties always write. I know, of course, that the past is falsified, but it would never be possible for me to prove it, even when I did the falsification myself. After the thing is done, no evidence remains. The only evidence is inside my own mind, and I don't know that any other human being shares my memories. Everything faded into mist. The past was erased. The erasure was forgotten. The lie became truth. If there's no God, why tell the truth? Your agenda becomes, right? Saul Alinsky, your agenda is the truth. And so you want to do anything you can to achieve, because if there's no God, there's no right and wrong, and you just want to do whatever you want. And so, so here we have the government spending money to study disinformation, and there's more there. I'm going to skip past some stuff. So now it's called the 1619 Project, Howard Zinn, and People's History. And it's all to portray the past negatively so the students will detach from it so that they can pull them into whatever socialist future they have. You have the color revolution. So after World War II, countries in Europe were free, and they formed republics and elected leaders, and they were trying to dig themselves out of the World War II. But the Soviets didn't like that. So they send in agents to do what's called critical theory. You spend a little time and just live amongst them and observe all the groups. Economic groups, ethnic groups, Bosnians, Croats, Serbs, religious groups, Sunni, Shia, Orthodox. And you classify them, some as victims, some as oppressors, the haves and have-nots. And then you would organize protests that you would escalate into riots and violence and bloodshed. Why bloodshed? Because then people think emotionally and not logically. And then you co-opt the media and channel all that emotion to blame the leader of the country for all the problems. And as people read it and blame the leader, the leader's popularity falls. And then they can do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet. And then the rioting suddenly stops. And everybody's happy until the dust settles and they realize they just became a satellite of the Soviet Union and they lost their freedoms. And so with this co-opting of the media, we had our CIA doing what was called the Mockingbird Project. And Alan Dulles was the head of the CIA, and he had 400 people in the mainstream media that the CIA would feed stories to, and to sway the public to adopt whatever agenda. So Carl Bernstein, Watergate reporter, Rolling Stone magazine, 1977, front page article, the CIA and the media, and he talked about these influencers. They disbanded it supposedly, but Obama brought it back with an executive order. We're hearing executive orders, but this was his. Using behavioral science insights to better serve the American people. What's behavioral science insights? It's PSYOPs. This authorized him to bring back the Mockingbird Project, to have the government realize that we're social creatures and we'll do what we see other people doing, and so the government can control the media and cancel the voices that they don't want. Why? Because they want to sway the public into adopting their agenda. And then he signed the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act, which allowed him to decide what information is disinformation and what's not. Under cover of Christmas, Obama establishes controversial anti-propaganda agency. It says, before the 2016 Christmas holiday, President Obama quietly signed the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. Deep within the act is a controversial position called Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation, which establishes a global engagement center under the State Department and consolidates the power of several federal broadcasting entities. The consolidation of power creates some concern regarding journalistic independence and credibility of media outlets. So, Mike Waller wrote a book, Big Intel, how Cold War heroes became spy villains, how the left subverted the CIA and the FBI. The dramatic story of the Cold War heroics of the CIA, right? Because they were helping to overthrow countries. So our CIA did the KGB thing in reverse because we didn't want countries to be in the Soviet orbit. So we would have them infiltrate countries and do crisis and then co-opt the media to blame the leader, and then we would get rid of the leader. But it says, the dramatic story of Cold War heroics of the CIA followed by its slide into Marxist influence and deep state dysfunction. Once upon a time, the FBI and CIA fought America's enemies at home and abroad. Now they are tools of the growing police state, attacking the left's political enemies, spying on ordinary American citizens, even parents who push back against radical public schools. How did we get here? And then Google agrees to pay $110 million to do what? To fund local newsrooms. So now they want to take their PSYOPs into your little local newspaper. And anyway, TikTok, and I thought this was an interesting scripture, 1 Kings 22. And Ahab, the king of Israel, had Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, come up. And he says, "Wilt thou go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead?" And the king of Israel gathered the prophets, about 400 pagan ones, and they all said, "Go up, the Lord will deliver it into your hands." And Jehoshaphat said, "Is there not a prophet of the Lord, that we might inquire of him?" And the king of Israel said, "Well, there is this Micaiah, but I hate him, for he does not prophesy good concerning me." And Jehoshaphat said, "Let not the king say so." Then the king of Israel called Micaiah, and Micaiah said, "I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him." And the Lord said, "Who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up to Ramoth Gilead and fall?" And the one said this manner, and another that. And then there came forth a spirit and stood before the Lord and said, "I will persuade him." And the Lord said, "Wherewith?" And he said, "I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And the Lord said, "Thou shalt persuade him, go forth." A lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets, plural. So you have all these prophets, but it's that same lying spirit that's in there. I thought this was an interesting. I don't know if you can turn the volume up on this or not.
Well, our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about trouble and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Notice the company that is displayed in the background there. So here you have this being used over and over again. Other clips that I share, but I'm not going to have time for them. Rand Paul grills Biden, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, about his disinformation governance board. And Rand Paul says, "Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in world history is? The U.S. government. I think you've got no idea what disinformation is. Are you familiar with McNamara, Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush, weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with the Iran-Contra? I don't want government guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. Do you think the American people are so stupid that they need you to tell them what truth is? I don't trust government to figure out what truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation." Personally, I think it was a miracle that Elon Musk bought Twitter and broke their narrative. And Lord Acton said, "Official truth is not actual truth." And then Kissinger said, "It's not a matter of what is true that counts, but a matter of what is perceived to be true." And I thought this was interesting. Americans trust mass media. Democrats 73%, independents and Republicans 10%. So you've got more of the Holy Spirit that warns you of when you're hearing a lie. And so lots of articles on this. And so this was interesting. A lot of money that goes to foreign countries, actually the corrupt leader keeps a part of it and lives really good, and the rest of it gets funneled back to the politicians in America that voted to give them the money. It's a money laundering scheme. Anyway, psychological operation and brainwashing. Now, during the Cold War, people made it through World War II. Remember Stalag 13 and The Great Escape and Hogan's Heroes? You know, they're in a little barracks and they're all buddying up and encouraging each other. Not the Korean War. They would isolate our guys for days, weeks, months until they got to this emotional, vulnerable place where they just craved wanting to have another human interaction. Right? They want to be with the buddies, a slap on the back. And when they're at this vulnerable spot, they would bring them into a room of guys who had already caved. But before they could be accepted in the group and get that emotional support that they craved, they had to reject America. Okay, America's bad. All right, you're one of us now. Okay. And after they were rescued, they still hated America. And our country psychologists are like, what happened to them? And so they realized that if you isolate people, lock them in their homes, get them to social distance, 6 feet, and until they just crave wanting to get back to normal. And they say, okay, but before you can get back to normal, you have to put this in your body, wear this on your face, and let us track you everywhere you go. And you're like, yeah, whatever. I just want to go back shopping again. I just want to go for a restaurant again. And so it was this manipulation of our desire to want to fit in with others. And they would give, anyway. So then they did what's called the Solomon Asch conformity experiment. Again, they're trying to figure out how group acceptance manipulates. So they would pull 8 students into a classroom. 7 had been paid ahead of time to be actors. 1 was a naive participant. And the teacher put 2 cards on the front desk. 1 card had 1 line, the other 3 lines. And one by one, they would go around the room, and the paid actors would say that the shorter line was equal to the first line. And they would say it really convincingly and everything. And it finally got around to that 8th naive participant. 30% of them would deny their own eyes to fit in with the group. They're looking at the lines with their own eyes and they're not equal. But they say, well, everybody else says they're equal. Yeah, I think they're equal too. Now, if just one other person disagreed, it went from 30% down to 5%. And they call it the spiral of silence. People will self-censor their views if they think they are in the minority. Right? If you think that you're in the minority, you'll just keep quiet. And another guy talking about. So Chuck Colson talks about a wine tasting, and everybody was in on the experiment except one naive couple, and they poured vinegar in the wine. This couple writes, "This tastes terrible." But then they go around the room, and everybody else says, "Oh, it was robust. It was great." And this couple scratched out what they wrote, and they agreed with the group. "Oh, yeah, it tasted really good." And then when somebody said all they did was pour vinegar in the wine, the couple that changed their views criticized the person for saying they poured vinegar in. And it's a phenomenon called false enforcement. Once people buy into the lie, they will help enforce that other people buy into the lie. Like, I don't know why I'm wearing this on my face, but I'm going to pull up my camera. You don't have it on yours, right? And so you get the little electrons lined up, and they'll put pressure on the rest of them. And so, Exodus 23, neither shall you follow the multitude in doing evil. So here they are saying there will be a multitude, and they will be doing evil, and you're supposed to be the stick in the mud. The whole human experience is a choice. Now, I'll talk about it other times, but you have all of creation, and God has everything run by rules, and we're the only ones with a free will, and He made us for fellowship. He made us to love Him, but there needs to be the choice not to love Him, for the choice to love Him, to be the choice to love Him. And so it's called the forsaking of all others and choosing the one. And I'm going to do one other experiment. I got 3 minutes left. So after the Holocaust, they're like, are all the Germans bad? And then they did this one experiment. And
a decade earlier, ecologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority.
Yale.
In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Learn. Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
Refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
So people will do what they see somebody in a lab coat telling them to do. So we've taken buying shoes because it looks like everybody's doing it to administering a deadly shock. Why? Because you want to have approval from somebody. And so the battle is for our minds. I don't have time for it, but another part called psychological projection where they do bad stuff and they blame you for it. Potiphar's wife accused Joseph of lusting after her when she was lusting after him. And this is a Military Review magazine, 1960, and it says, this is an example of propaganda, technique of name-calling. It is what the psychologists call projection. If you do something wrong, accuse the enemy of doing it before he accuses you. The one who makes it first has the advantage. A person ascribes motives to the opposition. He says, we've all heard children claim, he hit me first in order to escape blame for the fight. Soviet Union behaves the same way. So this is where you have them doing bad stuff and blaming you. David Axelrod was an advisor to a previous president. He said in Chicago there was an old tradition of throwing a brick through your own campaign office window and then calling a press conference to say you've been attacked. So you do the bad stuff and you blame the opposition. And so when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she approved money flowing, coming from Ukraine. She approved this Uranium One deal, and then $145 million from these sources appear in her Clinton Foundation. And so she's colluding with Russia. So what does she do? She pays for a Steele dossier to accuse Trump of colluding with Russia, right? And here it is. Hillary Clinton campaign pays $113,000 FEC fine in admission of guilt for producing the Steele dossier. And then you have Biden saying, I'm going to withhold money from Ukraine unless they stop investigating my son. So he's extorting Ukraine. What do? They accuse Trump of extorting Ukraine. Biden had classified documents in his garage. What do? They accuse Trump of having classified documents. They just wanted the headlines because they did this projection where they blame you. And Mitt Romney, Harry Reid lied about Mitt Romney not paying his taxes. And then Time Magazine said he did pay his taxes, and Romney says, well, I lied, but he didn't win, did he? So it's okay to do the bad stuff and blame the opponent for doing the bad stuff. And there's more there. Charlie Hurt, Fox News, the whole thing is like this game of projection. Whatever they accuse President Trump of doing, we find out that not only did President Trump not do it, but they did it. Elon Musk, they deflect attention away from themselves. It's sort of like a preemptive moral strike. Those who are saying that Trump is a threat to democracy are themselves actually the threat to democracy. And Nancy Pelosi called it the wrap-up smear. It's a diversionary tactic. You demonize them, and the wrap-up smear, you smear somebody with falsehoods, and then it's reported in the press. And anyway, there's a lot more there. So you have the minority of high priests, the priests stirring up the people to want Jesus. The people love Jesus. Here, 4 days earlier, Jesus comes into Jerusalem riding a donkey, and they're saying, Hosanna in the highest, and so they're praising him. But the small minority of priests manipulated the people to say, crucify him. And So why are we saying this? Because we see that they're trying to, they're going to try to manipulate people in the last days. You know, there's the story of King Zedekiah, and he's bad. And Jeremiah says, if you surrender to the king of Babylon, Jerusalem's going to be spared. And Zedekiah says, what will the Jews in captivity say about me? It's like, dude, you just got told by the prophet that this city is going to be burnt to the ground. And you care about what some people who are already in captivity are going to say about you? The fear of rejection is very powerful. Are you willing to be rejected by your friends? It says, some were going to follow Jesus, but they didn't confess him publicly, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they love the praise of men more than the praise of God. And so Peter's with a group around a fire, and a girl gets in his face and says, you were with Jesus. And you can just picture Peter looking around the fire, and everybody's eyeing him, and he realizes he's about to get kicked out of this group. No more acceptance. And he says, I never met the guy. It's like, that's it? You were with him for 3 years, and you denied him that quick? It's really a power that exerts itself, that we want to be part of a group. We do not want to be kicked out of a family group, a cultural group, any type of group. But after the resurrection, Peter's filled with the Holy Spirit, and they say, we gave you strict orders not to teach in his name, the Sanhedrin. And Peter said, we must obey God rather than men. Suddenly, Peter doesn't care about being kicked out of a group. What happened to him? Right? He's filled with the Holy Spirit. And so when everybody's kneeling in protest to the flag, this Giants pitcher, James Coonrod, was the only one not to kneel. Afterwards, they asked him why. He says, I'm a Christian, so I just believe that I can't kneel before anybody besides God. It's only when you have a relationship with God can you not care about group pressure. Jonathan Isaac, I met him. He's the only player not to kneel in protest to the flag. And afterwards they asked him why. He goes, all lives are supported through the gospel. Everyone's made in the image of God, and we all share in his glory. And so this idea of, do we want the approval of man or the approval of God? All of humanity, why did God make us? Well, for a relationship. And so there has to be the choice not to have the relationship for the choice to be a choice to choose him, right? For the forsaking of all others and choosing the one. And I'm skipping past stuff because of time. So, movies. Romance movies builds up to this moment of forsaking of all others and choosing the one. I think God is pushing the world to a decision-making moment. And what's the choice? Do you want to be accepted by the group? Do you want to be accepted by God? He set up this thing. And so the group gives you this group acceptance, but what's the state? The state is a weaponized group, saying if you don't cave to the government, then you're going to have all this bad stuff happen to you. And so God is putting us into a position where we have to make a choice. Do we want to be accepted by the group? If you want to be accepted by the group, the goalposts are constantly moving. And they're going to take you like, the J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, and for the longest time, she was like, she's pushing stuff that's maybe not as biblical. Well, she stood up for man and woman. Well, guess what? The left dumped her, right? It's moving goalposts, and it's going to take them all the way to hell. And all the way to say, well, you got to accept Satan, well, if the group says so. And then there's those that says, I'm sorry, this far, no further. I'm going to say no to the group, and I may lose my friends. I may have people block me. But all I care about is Jesus. Amen. Anyway, thank you so much.
That presentation was so impactful, I almost left my glasses off before I came up here. So thank you, Bill. Let's give him another round of applause. And as he was talking, it's kind of interesting. Paul the Apostle, writing to the Corinthians, said concerning Satan's strategies, he said, we are not ignorant of Satan's schemes. And I think what you just heard there is Bill just laid bare Satan's schemes. That's why our culture is in the direction it's moving in. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. Hope to see you back at 9:25. Olam worship will start us off, and then we'll move into a presentation from Olivier Melnick. Have a great time at the book table.
people are walking in, just wanted to introduce this song. This is called Holy Forever. And it's just a beautiful sound when you hear believers congregated together to worship God. But one day we're going to be doing it with saints from the past and saints from the future. So what a glorious day that's going to be, right? We're all praising God. And the thing we're going to sing about is His holiness. God is love, God is merciful, but we're going to be singing about His holiness forever. So as people are walking in, let's go ahead and rise and sing the song Holy Forever together. A thousand generations falling down to worship, to sing the song of ages to the Lamb. And all who've gone before us, and all who will believe, will sing the song of ages to the Lamb. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest. Your name stands above them all thrones and dominions, all powers and positions. Your name stands above them all, and the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever.
And if you've been forgiven, and if you've been redeemed, sing the song of ages to the Lamb. We sing, we sing. And if you walk in freedom, and if you bear His name, we sing the song forever to the Lamb. Oh, we'll sing the song forever and amen. And the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. Hear your people sing, holy, to the King of Kings, holy, you will always be. Holy, holy forever. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all thrones and dominions, all powers and positions. Your name stands above them all. Jesus, your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all thrones and dominions, all powers and positions. Your name stands above them all, and the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. Hear your people sing, holy,
It's tremendous. Well, our next speaker is Olivier Melnick. He's become a very close personal friend of mine. I don't know if he wants to claim me, but I'll claim him. And I believe that Olivier has been raised up for such a time as this because his heart is exposing anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And in case you hadn't noticed, that's on the rise. Have you noticed that? And so God has raised up people like Olivier Melnick of Jewish heritage who is a believer to sort of educate us on what's going on in the area of anti-Semitism. One of the tragic things that you're starting to hear more frequently is that the Jews living in the land of Israel are not really Jews. Have you heard that? And they do this to sort of delegitimize Israel's right to the land. I mean, if they're not really Jews, then they don't belong there. So that's part of the anti-Semitic philosophy that's coming our direction. And so Olivier is going to educate us about this. So let's welcome Olivier Melnick.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning. So I'm going to have two messages today, and as always, I always bring the good news. What is it?
1, 2, 3, start the clock.
Okay. Good morning. So I always bring you the bad news. The Jews. We're gonna take over the banks. We're gonna take over the world. We're gonna take over everything. And so we're gonna talk about that today. But there's one thing that I think we Jews are kind of good at is connecting and networking with people. We like to talk. We like to schmooze. And so we always we like to connect with people. So there's these two Jewish friends, David and Shlomo. And David is, I guess I can't move there. I got a anti-Semitic microphone. So David and Shlomo are getting together, and they always like to kind of, challenge each other. So Shlomo says, "Hey, listen, you want to play the game?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to play the game." So David goes, his name is David Bernstein. He goes, "David, Shlomo, I want you to think of 3 people that you think I don't know, and I'm sure I know them." And he goes, "Oh, really?" He said, yeah, okay. All right, first one, Harrison Ford. I goes, "Oh, gosh, that's so easy." He calls on the phone. He goes, "Hey, Harry, it's David. Hey, David, how are you doing? Oh, I cannot forget the last time I came to your house. The barbecue was awesome. Let's get together soon." Click. So his friend goes, "So, you can do better than that?" He goes, all right. President Trump. He goes, "Really? Okay." Donald. It's David. David, we're still waiting for you to come back to Mar-a-Lago. When are you going to come for dinner? Click. So he said, "You got one more chance. One more chance." So Shlomo thinks, and he goes, "Oh, they're 2 Jews, So he goes, "I got it. The Pope." He's thinking, his friend's Jewish, So he goes, "All right, okay, let's get on a plane. Let's go to Vatican." So they fly to Vatican. And they get there, and it's the time on Sunday morning when the Pope's going to come on the balcony and do the Mass and everything. So David says, "Shlomo, you stay in the crowd, and you watch on the balcony. I can't take you with me on that one. You understand? You watch. I will be coming with the Pope on the balcony." Come on. He goes, "Just watch." So Shlomo's waiting, and all of a sudden the Pope comes in, and right next to the Pope, there's a cardinal, and right on the other side, there's David. And Shlomo's looking, he's going like, "Oh my gosh." And then all of a sudden this person next to him goes, "Excuse me, I need your help here. Could you help me?" And Shlomo goes, "Sure, okay, what do you need?" "Could you tell me who's the guy in white next to Bernstein?" Okay. All right. So it's who you know. All right. So I want to tell you a little bit about Shalom and Messiah. This is the ministry that we are that we started about a year ago, and it was really started by two people, myself and Doug Gilmore. Raise your hand. Doug is right here. He's my VP of Operation. Make sure you come visit and say hi to Doug at the tables. We basically, as it says on the screen, we exist to expose and fight anti-Semitism, equip and mobilize Christians, and lead Jewish people to the Messiah. That QR code will come back at the end of the presentation. If you want to snap it right now, you can. This is the only time in church that you will hear me say, pull out your phone and use it. But silence it at the same time. That QR code will take you to our website where there's a lot of different things you can get, including the notes for this message and the message for this afternoon. So if you want to get the notes, there's a lot of information. By the way, I think that Bill Federer's presentation has more slides than the entire computer of mine with all my presentations put together. Amazing. We brought some books with us. Most of these are on the back table. So again, make sure you come visit and say hi to us. They're also all on Amazon. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And two different YouTube channels. This one on the screen, which is the Shalom and Messiah Ministries, where we put all the interviews and the teachings and the commentaries, as well as this new series that I started called Fib or Fact. When I ask a question and I respond within 3 to 4 minutes, is it true, is it not true? And there are great little videos you can send people on topics that are important to address. And by the way, you can always reach me. There's email on all those videos. If you have a question you want me to address, hey, Olivier, would you do a fib or fact on such a topic? Send it to me, and if it's appropriate and if it fits the mission statement of the ministry, we'd love to include that in one of our episodes. Also, there's another website, another YouTube channel, which is the Olivier Melnick's devotional. This is where I put my daily devotional Monday through Friday, 1 minute, 1.5 minute daily devotional on a couple of verses. And you can sign up for all this through that QR code that you will get again at the end of the presentation. And they're also on the book table. We have those QR codes. So if you miss them on the screen, now you have no excuse. You've got to come to the table. I'll do anything to sell a book. Refuting 3 lies against the Jews, 3 conspiracy theories. These are the most used against our people, and we've seen really a resurgence of those kinds of lies in the last couple of years, a year and a half since October 7, 2023. And those are the theory of the Kazars, the Rothschilds, and the protocols of the elders of Zion. So I'm going to try in the time that I have to cover all those 3. Again, I might skip some slides, but you get all the notes. And when you go back over the notes, if you want to reach out, email, ask a question, I'm always available, okay? I don't want to just leave you with notes. I want to start a relationship. I want to be a resource. So make sure that you stay connected with us. So the Kazars. Who has never heard the word the Kazars? Good. I'm glad I'm here. I mean, it's okay because most people have not, what are the Kazars? What is that? Well, the Kazars, their origins, the country of Khazaria was located between Turkey and Russia in a northern Caucasus region, and they became independent of the Turkic Empire at the beginning of the 7th century. They settled and dominated the area between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, as you see on the map. So what's so unique about the Khazars, because nobody really know a whole lot about them. They remained independent for about 200 years. Then there was a war, and eventually they became absorbed by Russia. And they kind of really completely disappeared from the map by the middle of the 13th century. The people knew they were part of history, they existed, but it's just like, the Khazars, who's that? Nobody cares, nobody, it's just like, it's this obscure people group I shouldn't say nobody cares because they're people, but an obscure people group that kind of, faded away, like many people group even in biblical days that don't exist anymore. So why are we talking about the Khazars in the context of modern days, 21st century, and in the context of anti-Semitism? Well, it goes back to the king, King Bulan of the Khazars, had a desire to embrace religion. He wanted to get religious. He wanted to get spiritual, and he thought, okay, let me figure out which one I'm going to pick, a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew. So he asked for theologians or leaders to come to his palace, and eventually, after listening to their arguments, he chose Judaism and converted to Judaism and brought with him others within his realm of influence to do likewise. Now, how many? That's a good question. How many actually converted? Now, the fact that King Bulan converted to Judaism is a fact of history. That's not a fib. That's true. How many did he bring with him? Nobody really knows. Some people say his entire kingdom converted. I doubt it. Or somebody said his immediate sphere of influence. We don't know. But people followed suit. They converted to Judaism after King Bulan converted to Judaism. They thought if the king does it, it sounds like a good idea. Now, in and of itself, that was not a big deal. It was like the 8th century, okay? And nobody really made any noise about it. And back then, the internet was in its infancy, so, nothing... No, it could not be in its infancy because Al Gore was not born. Okay, so yeah, so that's, I'm off on my dates. In the 10th century, Spanish scholar Hasdai ibn Shaprut, all of you know exactly who that is, I know, was made aware of the story of the Khazars, and he wanted to send emissaries, messengers, to investigate. And you know what? This is an incredible story. Some people converted to Judaism. We have to see if we can connect with these people. So we sent some people to the area to talk to people, to interview, to meet people. While they never got to meet with any Khazars, they received, the emissaries received letters from someone known as King Joseph of the Khazars that, of course, nobody met, but they got those letters. The letters were very detailed about the conversion, but they are believed to be hoaxes, forgeries. So far, there's really not a whole lot to validate the story of the Khazars. Forget that the conspiracy theory that the Jews of today are descendants from the Khazars. Right now, we're trying to establish if there's a lot of historical data to prove the existence and the conversions of the Khazars to Judaism. And there's very little. Some, but very little. Yehuda Alevi is another Jewish scholar who wrote a book. It's a fictional book, actually, as a novel in the 12th century, a book of argument in defense of a despised religion. Really, basically what he did, he called it the Kuzari, in his relation to the Khazars. It was a novel. It was fictional, but it was a book to defend the idea that Judaism was the best religion if you pick one. And because of what the Khazars had done a few hundred years prior, or 400 years prior, he thought this would be a good way to use in my research to prove that, hey, if you're going to pick one, we the Jews, we have it right, okay? So he wrote that book, again, it's part of history, but nobody really paid attention to it that much. So 700 years go by, almost 800 years go by, and we get this modern accusation that comes first in this book known as the 13th Tribe. And this man, Arthur Koestler, advanced the theory that all modern Jews are descendants of the Khazars. I'm a descendant of the Khazars, according to Arthur Koestler, which really is a convenient approach, like Dr. Woods just said, a convenient approach to delegitimizing Israel and the Jewish people's right to the land. If we're not the descendants of the Judean Jews of Israel, then really we're colonizing, we are occupying. So if all modern Jews are descendants of the Khazars, they are not Judean Jews. They are not the legal owners of the land of Israel. They are occupiers, they are colonizers, and then you all of a sudden have a justification for the events of the last, at least the last since 1948, even before that. The trying to push the Jews out of Israel because it's stolen land that really is Palestine, which of course we know is not true. But if we're not the real Jews, then what are we doing there? We're stealing land. So that's the big challenge there. And of course, this started to pick people's interest because it's bringing an argument that, hey, here is another way to get rid of the Jews. And Satan, the inventor of anti-Semitism, is always looking for new ways. So if we can find a new way to get rid of the Jews, let's milk that one until we, as far as we can. And so in his book, Koestler, and I quote, says, "The large majority of surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European and perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. If so, this would mean that their ancestors came not from the Jordan, but from the Volga, not from Canaan, but from the Caucasus, once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race, and that genetically they are more closely related to the Hun, Uyghur, and Magyar tribes than to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And, okay, here you go. "I am aware," at least he's being honest a little bit. "I am aware of the danger that it may be maliciously misinterpreted as a denial of the state of Israel's right to exist," you think. "But that right is not," listen, "that right is not based on the apathetic origins of the Jewish people, nor on the mythological covenant of Abraham with God. It is based on international law, i.e. on the United Nations decision in 1947. That was the vote that took place in November of 1947 that led to the May 14, 1948 Declaration of Independence. There's nothing mythological about the Abrahamic covenant, friends. Nothing mythological. It's the Word of God, every single word of it. It's the truth. It's exactly like it said. The Abrahamic covenant is foundational to a lot of what we read and what we believe in the Bible. Okay, so we need to pay attention to that covenant. But to him, it's a myth. So and the Jews are the Khazars. Shlomo Sands wrote two books that made him famous: The Invention of Israel and The Invention of the Jewish People. And I think he wrote another one called When I Stopped Being a Jew, or Why I Stopped Being a Jew. I forgot. I haven't really read those books because I got better things to do. But in the 2008 book, The Invention of the Jewish People, Shlomo Sands further validates Koestler's view. He said, in the 1970s, Israel was caught up in the momentum of territorial expansion, grabbing land. And without the Old Testament in its hand and the exile of the Jewish people in its memory, it would have no justification for annexing Arab Jerusalem. Already, pushing the agenda. 1970s, it's only about, maybe 7 years after Yasser Arafat was put onto the scene to start promoting the PLO, the Palestinian narrative. So it was new at the time, but it started to take root. Arab Jerusalem and establishing settlements in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and even the Sinai Peninsula. So the theory continues to grow. Now, how do we debunk it? Well, there's several ways. The Khazar theory can be debunked by archaeology. A lot can be debunked by archaeology, and the Bible can be proven true by archaeology in many, many ways. If you don't believe me, make sure you don't miss the two presentation by Dr. Randall Price, who is one of the best archaeologists alive today, who has a tremendous wealth of knowledge. And if he doesn't speak of it from the pulpit, go see him at the table, ask him, he probably knows. Okay, so archaeology, 1896, the discovery of this thing called the Cairo Geniza was one of the greatest Jewish discoveries. It was a storage facility containing some 400,000 medieval Jewish manuscript fragments. and spread out across several locations. Most of them apparently right now are being kept at the University of Cambridge. One fragment is known as the Schechter letter or the Geniza letter. Schechter after this man, Solomon Schechter. So the Kazar theory debunked by archaeology through because of the Cairo Geniza. I'll tell you in a second why. But this is Solomon Schechter studying all the findings in the Cairo Geniza for, let's say 400 or 40,000, I forgot, I always forget. 400,000 medieval fragments. To me, this looks also a lot like Pastor Andy Woods when he prepares for a sermon. Doesn't it? Doesn't it? That's his office right there with all the manuscripts, okay? But it gets really good when he's done. Amen? So the Schechter letter or the Geniza letter is only a fragment of the original document, but it differs from the accounts found in the Kazuria or the Hasdai ibn Shaprut letters that I mentioned earlier, in that it claims that Jews from Persia and Armenia fled persecution. Imagine that. Jews fleeing persecution. Never heard of it. And found refuge in Khazaria. They would have been Judean Jews, Jews from Eretz Israel, Jews from the land of Israel, who moved to Khazaria, and not Khazars who converted to Judaism. Did Khazars convert to Judaism? Yes. Yes, that is a true story. Not that many, and Jews in Khazaria would have been mostly Judean Jews who fled persecution. And that letter helps prove that. Now, there's a couple of gentlemen I want to mention because this man actually, he's not, he did some research in genetics, and the next guy also, this man's name is, I forgot his name, is, do I have his name somewhere on the thing? Maybe on the next slide, I don't know. So what he said is, we compared two genetic models for European Jewish ancestry depicting a mixed Khazarian European Middle Eastern and sole Middle Eastern origins. We conclude that the genome of European Jews is a tapestry of ancient populations including Judea's Khazars, okay, converted, Greco-Roman Jews, Mesopotamian Jews, and Judeans, Jews from Israel. And that their population structure was formed in the Caucasus and the banks of the Volga, with roots stretching to Canaan and the banks of the Jordan. So this guy, who's not a friend, he's trying to push he's not saying that Jews are all real Jews from Israel, but he's admitting that it's not a clear-cut decision that they're all Khazars. So he's saying it's a mix, okay? And the expert, whenever you do research on this, it always takes you back to the man who wrote the book, The Jews of Khazaria, Kevin Allen Brooke, and he says in his book, by this analysis, we can show that the dominant ethnic element among Eastern European Jews is Judean, the ancient Jewish people of Judea in the Middle East. So genetics and archaeology can disprove, if history is a little blurred, a little vague, genetics, 2025 genetics and archaeology can disprove the Khazaria theory or conspiracy theory that Jews are not descendants of Khazaria. They're Jews who moved to basically Eastern Europe, and I was born from what we call an Ashkenazi Jewish family, which is the Eastern European Jews, as opposed to the Middle Eastern Jews, the Sephardic Jews from Spain and North Africa and the Middle East. But we all come from the same place. Now, I do leave you with some questions to ask people who tell you the Jews are all descendants of the Khazars, they're not real Jews. Well, who converted the Khazars? We don't know. There's no record of that. So we know it's a true story, we hope it's a true story, but we really don't know the name of the rabbi or the Jewish theologian, or we don't know. How many Khazars converted? We don't know. What happened to them? Those who converted, did they started their own little Jewish sect of something? We don't know. There's no writing, there's very, very, very little, except for the couple of things that I mentioned about Ben Shaprut and Judah Halevi. There's very, very little. But here's my favorite one. If we're not the real Jews, why do you want to kill us? I don't get it. Oh, they're not the real Jews, they're imposters. So are we being persecuted for being imposters or for being Jewish? Or that doesn't make any sense. So the Kazar theory really doesn't stand on a whole lot. When people tell you, if somebody comes to you and say, hey, the Jews, they're descendants of the Khazars. First question is like, okay, explain that to me. Because that's interesting. Explain that to me. And then have them tell you, well, let me find the video on YouTube. Because that's all they're going to get. And because I can promise you, they did not read Brooke and the other guy, I forgot his name. I had his name on a previous slide. I deleted the slide, that's why I don't have his name. They didn't read the books. They watched a 15-minute video and then watch the video with them and say, okay, all right, so let's talk about this. It's going to take time, but when you have a skeptic, if it's somebody you care about, if it's somebody on the street passing by, whatever, you don't have time, I get it. But if it's somebody in your family, and some people come to me all the time, they say, my nephew, my son, my brother-in-law, my father, they believe this. I don't know. I just don't know what to tell them. I don't know how to debunk it. Sit down with them. It's going to take a little time. Watch that video, listen to them, and say, okay, let's unpack this. Let's see if it makes sense. At the end, it will not make any sense. So the next one is the Rothschild. We are Jews. We love money. Okay? That's what you hear. That's what people have heard for centuries. You laugh, you know it's a joke, but it's in every joke there's a part of truth. So, what's with the Rothschild? Well, when you hear somebody in a conversation discuss any current events, anything serious, and you go, well, you know, it's the Rothschild. You know what that means? Money, greed, control, Jews. All those words. Money, greed, control, and the Jews and Israel. That's the Rothschild. We're taking over the banks. We're taking over the, you know. So this reminds me of, I was going to move, but this microphone is keeping me. It's kind of like this invisible fence for the dogs. You know, if I go too close to the mic, okay, all right. This is scary. These two Jewish friends from the old country sitting on a bench in Brooklyn, and they're poor, they have nothing. They're retired, and they're sitting in Brooklyn, and his friend sits next to him, and he goes, what are you doing? He goes, I'm reading the paper, and he's looking at the paper, and it's a white supremacist, racist paper. And he looks at him and goes, what are you reading? What kind of piece of trash are you reading? He goes, I'm reading the paper. It's called Der Stürmer, which is like a really bad German newspaper from the Nazi Germany. It's a new edition. And they go, why do you read this? I can't believe it. After everything they've done to our people. He goes, listen, you and I have nothing. When I read this paper, we own the banks. We own Hollywood. We control the world. I feel good. So there you have it. The Rothschilds, it goes back to the mid-1700s. Mayer Amschel Rothschild was the founder of the banking dynasty. And there's no question that, you know, there is a banking dynasty. There is, you know, handling of money. I mean, we're not going to hide that. That's truth. But let's see what's truth and what's added to it. So he had... He was orphaned at age 12 with 4 siblings to take care of. He became the mom and dad. He became the apprentice to a famous banker, and he became, pretty soon, at age 20 or so, he became, age 19, the personal dealer in the sense of financial advisor, not drug dealer, financial advisor to Crown Prince Wilhelm I in 1763, and he began to amass his fortune in 1789, at the time of the French Revolution. And there was a lot of wars going on, and so that's how he started to amass his fortune. He quickly delegated his banking business to his 5 sons across Europe, and that is a little bit of a part of the problem. They became major lenders to various countries during the wars of Napoleon, the early 1800s. The sons were very spread across Europe, various countries, Germany, France, England, different places in Europe, and they kept moving. And they were involved in helping various countries during the war. And sometimes the sons, they're all getting along, but they found themselves on two sides of a conflict. So it was like you had two different sons of the same family doing business and dealing with two sides of a conflict, and you can't be right on both sides. So those were poor decisions. I'll give you that much. They were not the best decisions, but that created some of the conflict within the family and outside, looking at, look, they're all in it for money. Were they? No, probably not, and we'll get to that in a minute. But those were bad decisions, that's for sure. But let's look a little bit about the history of the name. The Rothschild name became synonymous with wealth and philanthropy. It was not immediately this negative thing. This is Tevye the dairyman from Fiddler on the Roof. You know his famous line, God, I know we're the chosen people, but once in a while could you choose somebody else? Can I relate to that? It also became a symbol of modern Jewish capitalism. Shalom Aleichem, the man who wrote the original book, the Tevye the Dairyman, which is the title of the book that the Fiddler on the Roof came from. He also wrote the song, and in the song in Yiddish, the Jewish dialect made of Hebrew and German, in the song it says, "If I were a rich man," the song as we know it, as we hear it on the play, on the movie, but actually it's in Yiddish is "Wenn ich bin Rothschild," if I were a Rothschild. So that's the original song, because back then it was nobody really saw this as a negative thing. But then, even though prior to that, the anti-Semites had started to provide the world with a lot of cartoons depicting how nasty those Jews are with money. So it started, there's one in 1830, so 1780 something is when the Rothschild family started. So 50 years after that it started. The 11th commandment depicted as Jewish men that most people think is supposed to be the Rothschild father. Get all you can get, keep what you get, and give away nothing. In other words, greed. And I'll tell you in a minute why the original Jewish greed comes from. I've shared that from the pulpit here before, but it's worth repeating. In 1845, the cartoon General Pump, this is German, so I probably don't say it right. I should probably ask somebody to tell me how to say it in German, but General Pump, or Pump, depicted Mayor Amschel Rothschild as a mean-looking gold dispenser to world banker, at the same time taking advantage of the little people. So the Rothschild are getting their reputation drawn all over the world on cartoon. 1898, this is Rothschild. It's a cartoon called Rothschild, and it's got this Rothschild leader as a demon holding the world. And it's interesting. I just noticed that in the center of his hands is France. I don't know how I feel about that. Okay, so. Then you have a series of magazines from the Museum of Horrors from France that drew a bunch of Rothschild family members as animals. This one is Charlotte Mayer Rothschild as a monkey, the Baron Alphonse as an animal with big claws counting money, the Nathan Mayer Rothschild, At the Origin of Billions is called here in the magazine. And this is, I don't know if I have it next. No, I'll talk about it in a couple of slides. He was accused of making a lot of money during the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo in Belgium in 1815. So all these guys are like getting into money. And of course, it stopped. It never, we haven't seen it recently at all. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. This is a 21st century cartoon. So the Rothschilds are like, banking, no pun intended, banking on the old image of the sons being on two sides of a conflict. Today's anti-Semites are saying, hey, they don't care. If the money's there, they'll finance it. They'll get their pound of flesh. So the Rothschild, interesting that they chose a pig because, pigs are kosher animals. Oh, by the way, okay, I have to say it. There is a way to make a pig kosher. You circumcise the pig. But it's complicated. So here's a 21st century cartoon of a pig feeding piglets as a multinational banking controlled by the Rothschild family. And so the Rothschilds are financing England or Great Britain, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the CIA, Israel, and Boko Haram. And you could probably update that cartoon adding a couple more piglets with Hamas and Hezbollah, and nobody would say anything. Nobody who would agree with this cartoon would have an issue, okay? So where is the problem coming from? During the Middle Ages, Jewish people, and some of you have heard me say that before, during the Middle Ages, Jewish people saw their rights dwindle to nothing. And they could not own property. They could not own slaves, which was a common thing back then. They could not be part of a guild. They could not be part of they could not become civil servants. They basically more and more taken away from them, and they could make a living. There was nothing left. One thing that they found that they could do, the Jewish community, is be money lenders because, according to back then, the church, the Catholic Church, a Christian could not borrow money from another Christian. That's not biblical. That's not good. Can we borrow from Jews or from non-Christians? Sure, whatever. So Jewish people started to become money lenders, and it started slow and small, but eventually it became a lucrative business. And when it became a lucrative business, the leaders of Europe went like, wait a minute, those Jews figured out a way. So what they did is they taxed the Jewish people lending money to the Christians and to the non-Jews, but they would tax our people a little more than the profit they would make from the loan they would give. So the Jewish people would still doing it, but they would lose money, so they have to raise their interest rate. And it went on for a while where the Jewish people ended up raising their interest rate several times, and that's how the myth of the greedy Jew became what it is today. Are we good with money? Thank you. I feel like now would be a good time to take an offering. Okay, no, never mind. Are we good? Are we good with money? This is called being shrewd, being smart with money, good investors, good using money in a good way. Yes, Jewish people, not all of them. You don't want to paint with broad strokes, but there are a lot of good Jewish people that are shrewd and smart investors and users of money. Does that mean that we're greedy? Not necessarily. I'll circle back to that at the end of the Rothschild in a few slides. But the myth lives on. In 1944, you look at, you go back to the war now. You're looking, after the Napoleonic wars and all those things. You have to move forward. 1944, Italian cartoon depicting Jewish bankers carrying money bags past dead soldiers. Like, hey, if we can make money, it doesn't matter how many people get killed. So there's a bloodbath. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna we're making our money here. And 2010, it's a Polish art on wood. This is a little piece of wood about that big. I almost brought it with me because I bought it in Krakow in 2010 on the marketplace, like a little, city farmer's market. They sell those. On the bottom right of that little plaque, you see a little coin. It looks like a penny. It's glued on the wood, on the image. It's a Jew counting his money, and that little penny on it is a good luck charm. You put this in your house and you'll be wealthy. So this is the money counting Jew good luck charm that you can buy in Poland to this day. Okay, so it continues. It continues to be propagated, that the lie of the Jews and the money. Of course, the book The International Jew, which we'll get back to when I talk about the Protocols of Zion in the next section, was published by Henry Ford in 1920. And financial leadership of the Rothschild family was seen by Ford as the epitome of the Jewish financial world. To Henry Ford, the Rothschild family became the symbol of Jewish banking control. So Ford was a really, really strong anti-Semite, and he's the only American civilian who received a Nazi medal from Hitler. The highest honor from the Nazi party to a civilian outside of Germany was received by Henry Ford. And it is believed that Hitler had a picture of Henry Ford on his desk. I drive a Ford. I drive a Ford. What am I saying here? It's been 105 years, okay? We cannot hold the grandparents and the great-grandparents responsible for what the people do today. It's the same with the Nazis. It's the same with... So we got to be careful. Do your research, but it's part of history. You don't want to ignore it. And it's in the notes. I'm going to not read this. Okay. Possible reasons for the Rothschilds' Greek theory. Why would people say that the Rothschilds are controlling? And some of the reasons. The Battle of Waterloo. Nathan Rothschild rushed to the coast of Belgium through the English Channel at a very high price. Arrived in London a day before the news of Napoleon's defeat. And the story goes on claiming that Rothschild profit from Waterloo, from the defeat of Napoleon, was 135 million pounds. That's back then a tremendous amount of money. Story was a hoax because it is proven by history that Nathan Rothschild was nowhere near the Waterloo region at that time. But even back then, nobody checked facts. Because if you want a story to be true, you'll believe it to be true because it fits your need for that story, for that agenda. Another possible reason is William Marr. William Marr is the man who coined the word anti-Semitism, antisemitismus, in 1879. First time it's ever written in a book. I mean, anti-Semitism, to be sure, goes back to biblical days, but the word itself comes in 1879. He had worked with a family close to the Rothschild and had been turned down for a job promotion that was given to a less deserving Jew. So in one of his memoirs, he recalled that the Goy, the Gentile, the Goy had to bear the consequences of the economic crisis. Edmund de Rothschild was also a possible reason why people got really upset with the Rothschild, because he was his nickname was the known benefactor. He purchased over 125,000 acres in Palestine. Back then it was called Palestine. You've heard me on that. You know what I mean by that. The landmass called Palestine before 1948. This massive land purchases gave credence to the anti-Semitic claims that Jews control the banks and want to control the world and buy everything. Okay? But here's an interesting word in this whole thing. Purchased. He purchased land that was swamp and desert land with nothing on it at the price of fertile land in America. High price. Not stolen, purchased. Somebody got money for it. It was not stolen. Lionel Walter Rothschild served on the Zionist Federation, and it was to this very Lord Rothschild that Lord Balfour addressed his short but powerful 1917 letter known as the Balfour Declaration, which was instrumental in the process of the rebirth of Israel as we know it today. So that got people upset. See, the Rothschild, they'll go talk to the... it really, we are Jewish people, we are really, really gifted at connection. networking. I personally enjoy that very much. I love networking. And not only Jews, but that's one thing that we like to do. So there was jealousy. Very often, anti-Semitism is connected to jealousy. Something happens and it's really is human nature. So the greedy Jew, old habits die hard. The Rothschilds were very rich and influential and most likely not squeaky clean. I'm sure they made some mistakes, bad decisions, bad choices. When they use poor judgment, or sometimes they even use greed. But here is what you need to remember, if you remember one thing. When you talk to your friend who's saying it's the Rothschild, it's the Jews, they control the money. If a Jewish person is greedy, they're greedy because they're a fallen person first, who happens to be ethnically Jewish. And they ask your friend, do you know of any greedy Gentiles? And you will have to say, he or she will have to say, well, yes. So why do we never point the finger and say, oh, they're Gentiles, they're so greedy, they want to control everything? Why is that? Because there's another agenda behind it. It's the destruction of the Jews. It's the delegitimizing of the Jews and of Israel. So the irrational claim that their greed, desire to control the banks in the world would be based on their Jewish roots is no more valid a claim than a claim that all Germans are Nazis or all Muslims are terrorists. Close one on that last one, but we don't want to paint with broad strokes. But to say that all Germans are Nazis. My mother, who lost her dad in the Holocaust, in the Auschwitz, could not step foot in Germany, she didn't like to buy German stuff, and she did not like the Germans. She just, she was 15 when her dad was taken by the Gestapo. She never recovered. So she did paint with broad stroke when it came to that, but she had experienced something that I have not experienced. Okay? But we should not paint with broad strokes. Not all Germans were Nazis, not all Muslims are terrorists, and not all Frenchmen are rude. Okay? Well, jury's still out on the last one. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I got 10 minutes left, so you're going to have to listen faster. But remember, you're getting the notes. Okay, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a booklet that is probably, if you're gonna name one bestseller, the best booklet that has done the most damage against the Jews in the history in the last 125 years, that's the one. It was created from plagiarism from two different books from the late 1800s and early 1900s, and it's in the notes. It's not important. The current version of the Protocols was first published in 1905, so 120 years ago. It's not that old, as it was originally written as the final chapter of a book written on the Antichrist by Russian mystic Sergei Nilus. He claimed that they were the minutes from the first Zionist Congress that took place in Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. Okay? Keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to get back to the minutes. The minutes. Why the minutes? Because when you think of board meeting minutes, you think of what? Precision. I mean, I go to board meetings all the time, and, did we discuss this? Well, let's go back to the minutes. Well, yes. Olivier said that, every word. The minutes are, the purpose of the minutes is to bring you back to the details of a conversation you had, yesterday, a week ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. Those are the minutes of the meeting. So this was claimed that they were the minutes from the first Zionist Congress. They were translated in German in 1919, and after that, many other languages followed. Jewish leaders are accused of plotting to take over government, banks, business, education, religion, and more. Okay? When I started looking at this, I started thinking, wait a minute, this makes me think of something here. Maybe there's something. Taking over government, banks, business, education, religion, and more. This big lie made me think of the big deception. What I mean by that is what is known as the 7 mountains of influence of the New Apostolic Reformation, NAR. which claims that, family, religion, education, media, arts and entertainment, business and government are to be controlled by the church. It's also known as dominionism or kingdom now theology. Okay? So it's not okay for the Jews to try to do it, but we should do it as a church. I don't believe the church should be into this. Okay? I don't support NAR. It's supporting a kingdom now theology. Kingdoms need king. Okay? The king is not returned yet. When he returns, he will reign from Jerusalem on the throne of David, and that's what's going to happen. Until then, we have to be patient. We have to build his kingdom, bring souls in preparation for the kingdom into salvation, get people saved for when the kingdom is inaugurated, when? At the end of the tribulation. Amen? Are we still pre-trib here? Okay, good. Just checking. But why is this? I don't get this. It's okay to we criticize the Jews for trying to do something which really we're not trying to do, but then the church is by some praised for trying to do the same thing. It looks similar to me, so that's to me very dangerous. It was just a little parallel here. The spreading of the protocols, 1920s, for about a year and a half, the protocols were also published by Henry Ford. As I mentioned, is international Jew. The Dearborn Independent was a newspaper that he was publishing, and it was there, but he had to apologize after, I think, about a year and a half, because he was sued and for libel, and he had to backpedal and say, okay, you know what, I take it back, this was not true. But it had already been debunked as a hoax, but it didn't matter. 1938, for 75th birthday, Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest Nazi award to a foreigner created by Hitler. Here's a picture. That's Henry Ford in the middle. 1925, they were republished in Middle East by King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. They were first published in 25, and they were republished for the Muslim world in 1970. That's the picture right there. One of the many covers, Jewish conspiracy, same theme. Can you back up the clock another 10 minutes? Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser produced a booklet based on the protocols. So that's another cover, the very famous tentacles of the Jewish monster taking over the world. They've been exposed as a forgery since the late 1920s. 1936, Hugo Valentin, in his book Anti-Semitism, characterized the protocols as the greatest forgery of the century in 1936, only 30 years after they were first published. Then Father Pierre Charles, professor of theology at the Jesuit College in Louvain, France, said it has been proved that these protocols are a fraud, a clumsy plagiarism made for the purpose of rendering the Jews odious. 1964, the Senate Judiciary Committee issued a report repudiating the protocols. Every age and country has had its share of fabricated historic documents which have been foisted on an unsuspecting public for some malign purpose. One of the most notorious and most durable of these is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But my favorite is, there's a man, his name is Benjamin Siegel. That sounds Jewish. According to him, in A Lie and a Libel, to bring into harmony all the various contradictory assertions, there is only one thing left for us to do. We must accept all of them as true. Just as Homer was said to have been born in 7 Greek cities simultaneously, so Nihilus translated the protocols from the French and the Hebrew simultaneously. But then he continues, and all the things that we know from history about the protocols. They were stolen by a noble woman of Chernigov from a high Masonic dignitary, and at the same time by the dignitary's wife or lover. This lady gave it to Nihilus' friend Shukotin, who simultaneously appropriated it from an extensive book of protocols or lectures notes that he found hidden in an iron. They originated at the Basel Zionist Congress in 1897, and at the same time in lecture notes in Paris students. In a chest at a Zionist headquarters in France, but also in Alsace, eastern France, and in Switzerland, simultaneously. They were also stolen from a Rothschild's house in Vienna and the secret vault of the Mitzrayim Lodge. They were delivered to Nilus in 1897 by a Russian spy, and equally by Sukhotin in 1901. At the same time, the French translation of a Hebrew original was sent from Paris by Rashkovsky to the Russian Interior Ministry in 1897 and then delivered to Nilus. We have no idea where they're coming. I mean, it's just like they're mysterious. That's their weakness. In the entire protocols, nobody ever knows the identity or location of the most powerful man on earth, the supreme leader of the elders of Zion. Sounds like Emperor Palpatine. The supreme leader of the elders of Zion. Nobody knows where he's from, his identity, where he lives. Yet, this is coming from the minutes, remember, of the first Zionist Congress, where you would have the name of all the attendees and their age and their position and their all those details. None of that. Also, in forging the document, for sake of time, I'm just going to mention that. I'm not going to read it. In forging the document, they mention something about the Panama Canal, and there was a 2 years discrepancy in the fact that they were 2 years early. I mean, it could have not happened, so they were not paying attention. And when you do forgery, very often you can easily debunk a hoax when you look at dates and people, you know. And it's like the quote that you see, don't believe every quote you read on the internet, signed Abraham Lincoln. That's the idea. So let me wrap this up in the 1 minute I have left. They are irrational. All the scriptures are there so you can read them on your own. They're irrational because they come from Satan. You know, this whole thing about getting rid of the Jews, he has the ability and the desire to make the irrational look and sound rational. You'll hear more about this, and I'll develop this further in this afternoon's session on what I'm going to be doing this afternoon. So you don't want to miss that one. I'll be there. We cannot fight anti-Semitism if we do not understand that we are in a spiritual battle, friends. We are in a spiritual battle. It's all part of Satan's desire to turn the world against the Jews and the Jews against Yeshua. That's what he's trying to do. And so he's behind it. And again, I'm going to develop that this afternoon. So consider this the introduction. Satan will fail. You know what? I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and we're going to say it together. 1, 2, 3. Satan will fail. I like that. That was good. So pray regularly against the father of lies. Provide others with the truth. Preparing to rescue and shelter our Jewish friends. I talked about it last year. I'm going to talk more about it at the end of session 2 this afternoon. Really, don't miss it. It's important. The time is now, friend. The time is now. I give you all the information if you want to read the books for yourself. And here is your last chance to snap this for the notes. God bless you.
One of the reasons we wanted Olivier to cover those 3 issues is you're starting to hear more and more anti-Semitism from the right. I mean, we expect it from the left, AOC, the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, that I call Jeremiah Wrong. But you're starting to hear these arguments, about the Kazars, etc., coming from unlikely sources like Candace Owens. You're starting to hear it from her. You're starting to hear it from Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson had a guest on his program trying to link the pre-tribulational rapture to the Rothschilds. John Rich, yeah. You're starting to hear it from people that, I used to agree with on a lot of things. Limited government people, a guy named Stu Peters, if you're familiar with him. You look at his Twitter feed, It's just one anti-Semitic statement after another along the lines of what Olivier exposed. So we're very grateful for someone like Olivier to shine the light of truth on this. Amen. Well, we're ready for another break. I've been asked to announce that we actually do have other restrooms on this side of the tent out there. That tent is pretty nice, and so are the bathrooms. We even have a jacuzzi out there if you're interested. I think there's a masseuse out there. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you at 10:45.
Well, that last talk was very, very eye-opening. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely learned a lot about anti-Semitism. And I think he briefly touched on this topic, so I think it's a really good segue because I think it's important to understand as Christians where we are in the timeline. Right? Jesus Christ is not reigning yet on his throne. It's not obscure through our hearts or through, let's say, a pope or anybody else, right? He's still yet future to come and reign on his throne. So I think that's a really good segue. This next song is called Elohim. And this is an original song by us, Olam Worship. And I wanted to introduce us on this song actually. So we just love scriptural depth in music, and a lot of the hymns that we love have a didactic or teaching aspect to the music. And so we really love that about the hymn notes, and we want to introduce that in our songs as well, a didactic aspect of worship. So this next song it's about God and his future coming and reigning on his throne. So I think that was a really good segue. So yeah. All right. If we can all rise. That'd be great.
The one who keeps his promises, the one whose will he accomplishes. No power or curse could ever thwart his loving grace forevermore. His loving grace forevermore. He gave a gift to Abraham, his righteousness unmerited, and through his blood I now partake in sins forever washed away, in sins forever washed away. El Shaddai, God Almighty, El Roy, the God who sees, El Olam, you're everlasting. We lift your name, O Elohim. We lift your name, O Elohim. Jesse's root and David's branch, who will fulfill his righteous plan, his holy rule on David's throne. Justice will reign forevermore. Justice will reign forevermore. El Shaddai, God Almighty, El Roy, the God who sees, El Olam, you're everlasting. We lift your name, O Elohim. We lift your name, O Elohim. So we await the glorious day. Your feet will touch Mount Zion's head, and every tongue in one accord sing, blessed is he forevermore. The one who comes in the name of the Lord. El Shaddai, God Almighty, El Roy, the God who sees, El Olam, you're everlasting. We lift your name, O Elohim. We lift your name, O Elohim. El Shaddai, God Almighty, El Roy, the God who sees, El Olam, you're everlasting. We lift your name, O Elohim. We lift your name, O Elohim. We lift your name, O Elohim.
Well, amen. Is this mic on? Hello, hello? Hello? Yeah, can you guys hear me? I can sort it. There we go. All right. Well, our next speaker is Dr. Randall Price. I got to know him probably 20 years ago at the pre-trib study group. And he doesn't want to claim the title because I've called him this before, and he says, don't call me that, but I'm going to call him it anyway. He's really a scholar. He's a scholar in the area of prophecy, archaeology, eschatology, Middle East, the temple. In other words, if you want to hear fact rather than fiction, this is the guy to listen to. And he's going to do a talk now on globalism God's way. Did you know God is a globalist? God is a one-worlder. It's called the Millennial Kingdom. And quite frankly, that's the only New World Order I'm interested in being involved in. So let's welcome Dr. Oh, and he's in a dangerous position too, because the only thing between you and lunch is him. So let's welcome Dr. Randall Price.
Yeah, but I told Andy that you would rather have spiritual food than physical food any day. So, all right. Yes, we're going to talk about globalism, and there's a positive and a negative. We're going to look at the negative first because we have a world that is out to, shall we say, from the humanistic point of view, build its own kingdom. But that is only a counterfeit kingdom. So I want to show you that and then show you how it fits with the real thing that God's doing. My purpose as a speaker, a minister, is always to comfort the afflicted, but also to afflict the comfortable. So I'll be sure if some of you feel uneasy about what's going on here, we need to do some spiritual accounting. So, all right, let's begin. People sit in bed at night. This was a cartoon I saw. And they think of all the things going on in the world. They watch the news, by whatever source you get it, whether it's some kind of online social media news. The younger people do that. Then the other people find their news on the television or still some in the newspaper. All of that has headlines, has with an intention to sensationalize, because that's what they're in the business. It is entertainment field. But all of those things grip us and we don't know what to do. What is happening in this world? What's going on? It's just a terrible thought. People say, what's the world coming to? And I say, well, don't worry about that. Look who's coming to the world. That's the promise. Nevertheless, all these things vie for our attention and cause fear. It's a big world. Now, when we talk about globalism is something that basically deals with this whole world. It's a focus of trying to dominate everything that is. So just the official definition is that it's the act of extending an influence to all parts of the world. It involves the emergence of a single world market or deregulation resulting in internationalization. Globalism offers an answer to the world's financial, environmental, technological concerns, as well as social and religious differences among people and nations. So having said that, I might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, nothing's wrong with that in the right hands. And if it's in our hands, it's a big problem. And history has shown us that. If you look at the whole history of this world, those who seek to conquer, and ultimately with a goal to conquer the world in some way, are all dictators, despots, kings, tyrants. History reveals that globalization comes on the heels of conquest, And the Bible declares that any time man attempts globalization, it results in the rule by wicked, ungodly empires. And how could it be otherwise, since it is implemented by Satan, currently the god of this age, under whose influence the whole world lies? And that's what 2 Corinthians 4:4 tells us. It says, in whose case the god of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, lest they see the light of the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ. So we have that adversary, and all men who've not come personally to faith in Christ are bound in that type of deception. So as we look at, and that was the passage it just gave, but you notice it tells us that there is a God of this world. We tend to minimize Satan sometimes, even make fun of him, which is a mistake, because he is, in terms of the angelic realm, the highest order of creation. And he has all of the intelligence of this world from the beginning of this world until now at his disposal. He knows exactly what he has, all the emissaries of the demonic world, the spiritual forces in high places, heavenly places, to bring this about. So in Satan's plan, globalism is the situation wherein he owns and controls the planet, demanding worship from its human inhabitants. And so you're either on one side or the other. You're in the kingdom of his dear son or in the kingdom of darkness. Your father is either God the Father or your father the devil. That's the only choices we have, and we're all in one of those or the other. Scripture tells us who are believers to put on the full armor of God, that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle, and notice this, is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers, against the powers, against the global forces. Your text will say against the world forces, but that's exactly what it is, the global forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So we have this invasion, as it were, by aliens on this planet, seeking to conform it to the will of the one who sent them, which is Satan himself. Theodore Roosevelt put it this way, an interesting thing. He said, behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. And that's that shadow government, that's that invisible hand, that's the, in years past, decades past, they hid in the shadows. You would refer to them as the Illuminati or some kind of strange Luciferian term. No one knew who they were. That's all changed, folks. They're right out there, proud as can be, to announce it in Davos, Switzerland, or wherever they may be, who they are and what their agenda is. Nothing is hidden anymore. So when we look at this invisible global government, fairly simple. Satan is at the height or the head of this. Evil spirits are his emissaries. And we have human accomplices, which are the global elitists and those who serve them. So these are the global forces of darkness, which encompass this world. We rarely see that. We feel it. We often wonder who's controlling this. We see people in places of authority who don't seem to have the capacity to carry out their rule. No names being named here. But you say, who's behind this? Others than those who we can't often see. The global elitists are an international or intergenerational cult that have existed throughout history with the single goal of controlling and centralizing all authority under one global leader. The World Economic Forum, meeting in Davos, Switzerland, is the annual site for globalist networking. And you can see that, and there's reports coming from it, but they are very proud, and many of the people who are considered stars in the economic world or in the technological world today are members of this. Well, I thought an easy way of handling this would be to chart it. First, looking at globalism man's way. I think charts are very good. They take their way of systematizing material. I have a chart book called Charts of Bible Prophecy, so the closest you'll get to some of this and being able to defend it is from a book like this, but puts it all together. So we're going to look at globalism man's way. These are things that come right out of the agenda they've announced. First is the Great Reset. You've probably heard that term before. Let's get things all started over. We have to rebuild. We have to renew. Part of this is global depopulation. So when you look at this, the Great Reset is the urgent need for global stakeholders to cooperate simultaneously managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, which was perhaps introduced in order to do this, or at least to take advantage of the COVID-19 crisis to instill their type of overall control for our good, of course. To improve the state of the World Economic Forum is starting the Great Reset Initiative. So we have this in different forms, different leaders announcing the New World Order, Build Back Better. We now have a chance to do it right. This has been part of the agenda that we've seen for the last 8 years or more in our government. And some of this is simply globalism right at its face. Klaus Schwab, who is well known as the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, says the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, reset our world. Those are buzzwords you hear frequently. Biden, when he was president, said the quiet part out loud. He said, this crisis presents an opportunity. And opportunity for who? We saw it in Time magazine, the Great Reset. You know, remaking the world now on a global stage or global scale in order to implement an agenda that has heretofore not been possible. Depopulation is a part of this. You can't reset with all the folks around that have such different opinions. So some of the members of the World Economic Forum have the goal of reducing the global human population from 7 billion to 100 million. That's a lot of folks gone. But they're folks that you didn't need anyway, you see, because they're just holding things back. This intentional depopulation is in harmony with the belief that humans are just material beings, no different or better than other matter. Environmental balance depends on reducing the human threat to nature. Those who think they are God and worship the world want depopulation so the right people can be in control. Margaret Sanger was part of this elitist group. She's the founder of Planned Parenthood. One of her statements is that all of the problems are the result of overbreeding among the working class. The most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. Okay, we've got to get the right people in the right way. Ted Turner, founder of CNN, which I don't think anybody watches much anymore, but Ted said a total world population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. How do you get to that? We'll talk about that in just a minute. Jacques Cousteau, if you've ever, some of the older ones know him, the younger ones may not, but he was an oceanographer and a Frenchman, and he said, certainly an environmentalist, but he said in order to stabilize world population, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day. It's a horrible thing to say, but it's just as bad not to say it. And then someone else you might know, possibly a slip, but she said we must reduce the population. And the White House did a quick fix. They said, if you look at the text, she meant to say reduce pollution. There's a big difference between that, but anyway, all right. So how do you depopulate the planet? Well, there's different ways. First, natural means. Pandemic was one of those. You see different voices say that. Here is Michael Yerden saying, COVID vaccine, an integral part of the Great Reset. It seems increasingly likely that the jabs are part of a much larger set of interlocking projects, someone said. Whether or not, you know, we can debate the vaccine all day, but the point is that it was introduced without testing. It was introduced by command. It was introduced forced on people, and people were lost jobs in the military and other places. This is something that exercises a type of control. If you look at China as an example, 400 million people were put in lockdown, In quarantine, one study estimated 1.4 million deaths shortly after the zero COVID ended in China. Remember, they said we have zero COVID, but everybody was locked away and locked in their apartments, so they couldn't get out. This is the way they handled that. Nearly 2 million excess deaths followed China's sudden end of COVID curbs. Here's another one. If unvaccinated people ordered to stay at home or face jail, you remember that at times. Biden was talking about a war on the unvaccinated Americans. That was that social pressure that Bill talked about earlier. But if you didn't do that, I remember, I went to the doctor, my wife and I, and he said, "Have you had your COVID shot?" I said, we're not taking those. And he began to pressure us and say, and I was teaching at Liberty University at the time, he said, "You are killing people. You're killing people." And I said, "Well, you're a hematologist. I'm here to not to take that." But he wouldn't let us leave. He wanted to see, "You must do this." And it was a great deal of pressure applied. And this was, some of you experienced that. Another means was social means. Abortion is that way. You can reduce the population. We have been reducing the population. You can see since 1973, when Roe versus Wade made abortion on demand legal, there have been 63,459,081 abortions in the U.S., and this was a stat from 3 years ago, with 3,000 occurring daily and over 0.72 billion abortions worldwide. It just keeps on going. Think how many people would have been here, what they would have accomplished, how many people could have cured cancer, or who knows what, famous. It's unimaginable what we have lost as a result of losing these lives. But this is part of the agenda. We don't matter because we just matter. All right, the Wall Street Journal, upholding Roe versus Wade is supported by most Americans, they said. In your polls, you have people, because they put this in the rights issue. We have rights. What's that, being inside of you? They have no rights? All of a sudden, whose rights? Our third way is simply economic means. And we see this, and we fear this probably more because of the idea of a recession, the idea of economic collapse. We've seen the economy being ruined on a global scale. And that's essential on the route to the Great Reset. Joseph Mercola said, "This is to cause more terror, push up energy prices, terrify everyone." Of course, I have California's energy gas prices there, and that's from several years ago. So, this is, we fear this. We see it as we try to go to the grocery store. The aim of this, as Carol quickly said, is nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Right, so, you're going to give up anything to have the pleasures or the normalcy or the simple things you're used to. It's what Francis Schaeffer used to say. People will give up any type of personal freedom in order to have a little bit of security. That's the kind of thing that's here. So we've seen this. There's another means, and that's political means, crisis and war. If a pandemic doesn't take enough lives, and abortion doesn't take lives, and recession doesn't move things in the direction, there's always crises and war. We talk about crisis in human existence. Martin Buber put it this way, and this was, of course, from the 70s, he said this, "For the last 3 decades, we have felt that we were living in the initial phases of the greatest crisis humanity has ever known. It grows increasingly clear to us that the tremendous happenings of the past years, too, can be understood only as symptoms of this crisis. It is not merely the crisis of one economic and social system being superseded by another, more or less ready to take its place. Rather, all systems, old and new, are equally involved in the crisis. What is in question, therefore, is nothing less than man's whole existence in the world." And that's what crises are aiming for. Do we have a right to exist, and can we exist? I just did a little survey of some of the crises that existed in the former administration. We had the COVID crisis, the border crisis, the energy crisis, the inflation crisis, the Russian-Ukraine crisis, the Iran nuclear agreement crisis, and the China-Taiwan crisis. And some of those, of course, still are with us and more coming. And we don't even have on there the Israeli-Hamas and Middle East crisis. So all these things are there aiming to destabilize and ultimately depopulate. Joseph Mercola again said, all we need is war. He said, the Great Reset is a globalist plan that is moving forward at lightning speed. The COVID-19 pandemic was part and parcel of that plan, but to really fulfill the technocrats' ambitions, a war of some kind is needed. They need chaos, mass casualties, financial chaos, in order to create the desperation necessary for people to give up their freedoms and give in to tyrannical control. And of course, you will do that. You stayed home, you distanced 6 feet, you put on masks, you couldn't even go visit your alien relatives, some who were dying, all that because it was good for you. It was the best thing, kept you safe. And now, Putin's invasion of the Ukraine risks global stability. You see the headlines that are there, or something like this. Well, global war on the Jews. I'm not sure why it won't stay there, but it's the global war on the Jews. So as Olivier was saying, anti-Semitism is at the highest it's ever been, I think, in history. Even we talk about the Nazi situation, but pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian demonstrators worldwide against the state of Israel. You've all seen it. You know it came also on our college campuses. And with people citing the phrase Allah Akbar, great is Allah. It's not simply a political thing. Notice this is a religious statement, and it's even more than that. This is Washington, D.C., with people swarming there. Here we have the United Kingdom, or we had the United Kingdom. There it is. Okay, not sure why my effects are doing that, but there you see it, globalizing. All right. And also some of the flyers that you pick up. Here, this was a statement made at one of the universities, George Washington University. Anarchists call for the beheading of school administrators. Where'd they get that idea? Amid anti-Israel encampment, or fight for worldwide intifada. That's a call for global conquest in the name of Islam. Why is that doing that? Wider war in the Middle East. Quick. Okay. Global consequences coming from that. Here, Israel is likely to attack Iranian nuclear facilities within the next 6 months. Part of that is because Iran is weakened right now because of the loss of their help from Syria, Lebanon, Turkey's coming to fill that gap, of course. But the issue here is that if there's a weakness or a time that they can hit these facilities, this would be it. They have the Trump administration saying they will back up anything Israel needs to do for its security, so that could happen. Iran's president dismisses potential Israeli strike, threatens to build thousands of new facilities. This is all, of course, posturing, the saving face, making it clear that they'll do something they probably can't do. Also, we have the statements, okay, this is a clash of civilizations. And so a clash of civilizations means just that we have even the ancient world and the modern world clashing and being replaced by something else. The globalist mandate is the world must collapse by 2030, and one of their target dates is 2025. So this is part of what we see them thinking of. And then we have an America First agenda, and that right now is one of the things slowing this down, because rather than having globalization, everyone working together, we have this idea of sovereignty of nations, each having their own place and even destiny. So that is a step back from their plan. And I'll show you at the end when Donald Trump addressed Davos recently, and you can see them all squirming in their seats. But all right. So the second thing here on our chart, from the Great Reset, it moves now to what we would call climate change. You've all heard of climate change. What does that mean? Well, following the Great Reset, we have to have something that is global, massive, environmental, that compels all of us to submit, and that is climate change. With climate change comes global warming. They don't use global warming anymore, they just say climate change, but a biometric conformity to things, non-conformity lockdown, that's what happens if you don't conform. All this is part of the terminology they use. Now, Time magazine says climate is everything, right? The whole world is affected by climate, and it's very important. When you look at this idea of climate change and global warming, on the one hand, you can just see how the images will affect you. As you see things burned up, or you see polar bears floating on a little bit of ice cube or something like this, this is what is out there, that we have very little time left. One Earth, one chance. Within 10 years, 12 years, whatever, where the world will be over, we have to do something now. This is the idea of the doomsday clock. Climate change, 12 years to save the Earth. So people get very passionate about this because this Earth is all they have. And they believe that if they don't save it, there's nothing left. This is their great agenda. Time magazine says, be worried, be very worried. And again, the polar bear, all right? And polar bears can live in places that aren't cold, by the way. I mean, it doesn't matter. Okay, the Green New Deal, or the Green Initiative, we'll talk about shortly, but climate justice. Skeptics will be punished. This is the idea that if you don't fall in with this, you're in trouble. Now, there's a new thing that we could consider. Some of you, it's still debatable, but weather warfare. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the 36th President of the United States, in a speech one time said, "He who controls the weather will control the world." And we have this picture of geoengineering. There was a movie not too long ago called Geostorm. And in Geostorm, they already had the geoengineering working out. They had satellites that could be programmed to manipulate the weather at different places for our benefit. Good thing. But what if it wasn't? What if there are those who are actually doing things to control the weather for their own agenda? So there are those who talk about toxic skies and global dimming. Again, there's good evidence for this, but there are people who still push back on it, and I'm not sure exactly where I stand, but I want to present that. They're saying there's a decrease in the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth, and that's believed to be caused by pollution in the atmosphere, but it's pollution that's introduced. People who look at this talk about bringing about our own weather, and that is a means of controlling things. I mean, imagine, we had some severe cold, and they call it the polar vortex that came where I was too, up in Virginia. We hadn't seen snow in 3 years. All of a sudden, we've seen tons of snow in the last number of months. What is that coming from? Is that just unusual? Some say, no, it's engineered. Other countries have thought that. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was at one time the president of Iran, he said that Europe is stealing Iran's rain, or that Iran drought was part of a soft war. So some of these other countries have actually believed that this geoengineering is happening. And some say everybody's doing it, using electromagnetic fields and microwave transmission to bring this stuff about. You see planes with their various jet emissions, which are not simply, air trails or something more, it's claimed. Again, I say this is still controversial, but there are people who say this is part of the globalist agenda to control our weather as well. So I'm simply saying Russia spent millions on cloud seeding tech to prevent rain on its public holidays. So people are using things like this where it's necessary. We've also seeded things to produce what we need. So the technology existed for a long time. Question is, how is it being implemented and who's doing it? So we have the Great Reset, we have climate change. The next thing on this to move us in the direction of this planetary agenda is the idea of the Green Initiative, which involves deplatforming people and ideas and institutions and canceling culture. The culture, for instance, a Judeo-Christian culture, which stands in the way of many of their ideas. So, along with this green initiative, you have a new world order, a world king, global citizenship, peaceable kingdom, they call it, social mandates, united biometric indicator that's there, global earth ethic, life extension, all of these things. We've seen this kind of thing introduced where you see an unchecked, unelected official for the first time, this was, of course, Fauci, be able to come on television and tell you how you were to live your life, what you could wear, what you couldn't wear, where you could go, where you couldn't go, when you could do it, all of these things. And he, all of a sudden, controlling the lives of every person and their children, governing their medical behavior, shutting down their jobs, schools, churches, forcing compliance to unchallenged mandates, no matter their age or social status, and further, deny their freedom to go to public places or buy food or other commodities. No one on earth has ever had this power. He created worldwide fear and required unquestionable compliance. We allowed that. Okay, I don't know if anybody, just everybody was lockstep, including President Trump at the time, because he didn't know better. Something had to be done. That's what a crisis will create. So the globalists are taking over the food system, and it's part of their plan to control you. If you think about this, look at this. 6 corporations control almost everything that we watch, hear, and read. Okay, those are those companies. So you think there's all these brands, but they're all under these major corporations that control things. When we talk about tracking, here at Davos, they introduced the idea of the carbon footprint tracker, a new tech that will track what you eat and where you travel. Everything is all possible to be done. So the government will know your whereabouts, your habits at all times, control where you're allowed to travel, ultimately control your bank accounts and purchases. They'll know every single place you spend your money. This is the idea of a digital identity. And again, this sounds good. Wouldn't it be good if you had all of these things under one easy to reference, access portal? I mean, everything here. And yes, it would be if it were not for the fact that the people who control it don't have your best interest in mind. They have something else in mind. So this is the idea. Last night, Andy mentioned about the idea from Revelation about receiving the mark of the beast. The idea is a mark. It's like a tattoo. It's something on the skin. And so they have a technology that can do that, to put these quantum digital dot tattoos that will have all this information, everything, every place you go, everything you do, and they'll track what you buy at the grocery store, which of course you don't have to pay for anymore. You just walk in, get what you want, walk out, but it's charged, to your account. And you can imagine if you're not in compliance, what that means. It means you can't walk out. You can't even walk in. You're not going to be able to buy anything or sell anything. And that has some ominous implications. So I looked at this when I was teaching at Liberty. I'd get this on my computer regularly. Someone was scanning everything I did to be sure that my emails and everything, it talks about your internal contacts make up this, explore your habits, you have this many quiet days. It's kind of an invasion of privacy. Why can't I do what I want to? Well, no, I'm hooked to a system, and that system tracked everything I did. Now, it's within a Christian community, so I feel safe. But nevertheless, that's the technology that's there. We can be vaxxed by machines, tracked by machines. Humanity can be augmented one cell at a time. And that moves us a little closer to the next step we're going to. Once you get this level of control, why not just keep it forever? That will involve the life extension. So what we have now is the metaverse. Have you heard of the metaverse? Metaverse is oneism utopia, new reality, synergy, event horizon, convergence, singularity. These are all terms that are used. And we talk about a world man or human solidarity. We talk also about post-humanism and transhumanism. In other words, we could be better. We don't have to wait for evolution to get us there. We can do that ourselves. The metaverse is simply a technological term for a network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection. And secular futurism, it describes an iteration of the internet as a single universal virtual world. Achieving human integration into the metaverse is the agenda of the globally oriented technologies and their transhuman projects. In other words, we're all connected. We can be all connected. We can all think the same thing. Everyone can know your thoughts. You can know their thoughts. But you're going to be a very different person. And Klaus Schwab puts it this way: our goal is not to change what man does, but to change what man is. So fundamentally, we're going to be changed. One of the leaders in this is Yuval Noah Harari. He is an Israeli. He is gay. He is an atheist. He's one of Klaus Schwab's top advisors. He says, we're all in the process of becoming gods, and we need some type of global loyalty. His book, Homo Deus, Man is God, is his idea. Listen to this quote by him. We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. In the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds. Okay, so we won't be what we were. And this, if you look at the idea of reimagining man, Scientific American extols this, how, Darwin's theory survives, thrives, and reshapes the world. But the future of human evolution, if you look at it, and here's this quote, the ultimate purpose of evolution is not the evolution of physical beings, but of intelligence until it becomes self-existing without a gross body. Technology is the means to advance this evolution so that transhumanism can be achieved. And what is transhumanism? Well, Ray Kurzweil says, our desire is to create a post-human species. So the idea of being created in God's image doesn't exist, because God doesn't exist to these people. We don't create us in our own image, we create it in a better image. So he says, does God exist? I would say, not yet. Okay, that would be us. And so, this godlike AI that could destroy the human race is nearly here, and we're not in control. Machine learning expert warns. I did this myself. AI, I am God. I don't know. But we've had already AI rewrite the Bible. You can get an AI written Bible. You can have the AI Jesus talk to you and comfort you out there. Almost every article I'm getting nowadays is written by an AI assistant. They do a good job, but can you check every source they use? Do you know what they're doing? No. I ask it to write an article I was doing on the archaeology of Jericho, because I was about to get into all the research, and I had this immense thing with all the sources, everything come out. But I said, I don't have time to read this to make sure it's right, because people depend on me to give them that information, to discern what's out there. It's amazing what is available. And I'll show you in the presentation this afternoon how I ask different AI platforms, the designer bots, to create me an image of Jesus standing on the Mount of Olives looking at the Temple Mount. And you'll be amazed to see what I didn't get, all right? All right, Elon Musk, whatever you think of Elon, he says, this AI, with its move to possibly singularity, which you have the AI become sentient in some way and step into this and then merge with humanity, has the potential for civilizational destruction. Now, what's concerning is that AI is good in the right hands with the right purpose, but it's bad with the wrong people controlling it. The United States is in a race for control of society. Whoever wins the development race and secures AI as a control for society win control of the world. This is clearly paving the way for the Antichrist to control society, but how soon that might occur will depend on whose technology succeeds and what their ideology might be.